Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the StattoJoe podcast on this fine Tuesday night. How are you doing, Luke?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Just we're both kind of busy at the minute, aren't we? We're really kind of fitting this in as well as we can with
Absolutely.
our schedules. Been a busy weekend of football action. We had, probably the best place to start very, very briefly because we will, in the audio intro that you guys can hear exclusively over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Obviously, the biggest news, we thought, if we had the Messi thing, surely things couldn't be any more mad than Messi leaving Barcelona, and then the Ronaldo saga that took place over 24 hours. Just want, for this version of the YouTube version, just your quick, brief reactions on that and what happened there.
Yeah, don't really care. No harm to. It's fine. Yeah, great. Ronaldo's gone. He's 36, moving to United. Happy for United fans. That's what they've always wanted. Don't think it's going to be a ridiculous seismic shift. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is still the manager. I don't think things changed that much with Ronaldo being there now. But yeah, crazy.
It was just such a bizarre situation. After watching United yesterday, it's mad to me that they've invested so heavily in attack without fixing their the central midfield issue. Because
Yeah.
Fred was so bad.
Yeah, it's just really a holding midfielder that they need, and if they got a holding midfielder, then I think you could argue that their squad's one of the best in the Premier League. It still probably is one of the best in the Premier League, but if they were to get somebody there who could sit slightly deeper while Pogba and Fernandes go forward, then to be sorted. But they have done well, obviously, with Varane coming in. I wonder, do they think with Varane that'll help solve defensive issues? Because obviously he's great, but yeah, a defensive midfielder was trending last night on Twitter. Sign a DM was trending on Twitter. So, United fans are all thinking the same thing. Ronaldo is great, but after yesterday's performance, I think they want more.
Yeah, and I don't think we saw anything from the front three for United yesterday. Dan James has to go. He's just so mediocre. And I think it's, if Ronaldo's playing that game, I don't think it changes anything in their performance. I think that they were a bit rugged at the back, and Wolves had so many opportunities, didn't take them. I don't know. I just kind of felt like United were quite uninspired, I would say, throughout yesterday's game.
Absolutely, they were, and it comes down to tactics, comes down to motivation, comes down to quite a few things, and I think international break would be good for them to be able to regroup, potentially make a signing or two today and tomorrow, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. But really, this whole weekend's been dominated by two fixtures, and I want to focus on the closer of the two for this podcast. Obviously, Liverpool played Chelsea on Saturday night, which was a really intriguing game. And it was exactly what we thought it would be when we talked about how it was going to be a real kind of tactical battle, and you were going to see probably the best of both managers in terms of how they manage their teams and their setups. Certainly in the second half, we saw that from Chelsea and how well they played defensively. But let's begin, like we always do, with both teams' lineups and go through the lineups. And let's start with the home team. That was Liverpool. Go this way. Pretty standard Liverpool team, with the one surprise inclusion being Harvey Elliott, who's kind of played his way. Klopp seems to have a bit of faith in him. He's almost played his way into that team, but I'll just break it down very quickly. So obviously, Alisson nets, Trent right back, Matip and Van Dijk in the centre, Robertson left back, Harvey Elliott, Fabinho and Jordan Henderson in the midfield, and then Mane on the left, Salah on the right, and Firmino up front. So no Diogo Jota, which was probably the biggest exclusion in that side.
Yeah, a very standard Liverpool team, all things considered. You look at the team that won the league and won the Champions League a few years ago, and you don't see much difference, and that's a good thing. Consistency is great for Liverpool. A lot of Liverpool fans will desire a few signings, which I think is justified. But starting 11 wise, it's a really good starting 11. You can't really ask for much more from your back five. Really solid. Fabinho and Henderson being able to play alongside each other in midfield rather than in defence is a big improvement from last season. And then the front three are the front three, and when they're firing, they fire very well. Diogo Jota, arguably you could say he deserves to be in that team instead of Firmino, but I think you know why Firmino played in this game, because they needed more of the ball, and Firmino allows that. I think allows for a bit more possession retention compared to Jota. Harvey Elliott, yeah, absolutely. He's 18 and he's made his way into the Liverpool team. Wijnaldum left obviously on a free. People wondered who would replace him. Would this mean Thiago would just slot in? Does this mean the Ox gets a chance? Even Curtis Jones or Naby Keita? They've got 4 good options there. But Klopp has obviously liked what he saw last season from Harvey Elliott out on loan in the Championship with really good numbers, to be fair, return-wise last season. So he put him in last week. He had a cracking game last week. And I think it shows that Klopp has a lot of faith in him. He's a young guy, 18, and Klopp's happy to start him against the European champions with 2 of the best midfielders in the world right now, in Jorginho and Kante, up against him. And I think Harvey Elliott did a superb job.
He did. He played really well, and it's a massive confidence booster if you're being put in that starting 11 against the European champions. You know, you've been put in that team against one of the best teams in Europe, and to play the way he did showed a lot of maturity. If we just go through some of his stats, he made 75 passes out of 86 attempted, which is, for an individual player, is super. And he just played a really decent game that, you know, a 7.2 rating, just really solid. Just, you know, didn't let anybody down. Didn't do anything maybe exceptional in terms of, there was one moment where like, oh my days, that was unreal. But he played so well throughout the game that he justified his selection.
He did. He absolutely did. Even that Harvey Elliott made 107 touches of the ball, which is huge. Like, that's a lot of touches, and it shows his desire to get on the ball. You look at Van Dijk, even a player who notoriously gets a lot of the ball from Alisson, will play out the back quite well. He made 88 touches. So for Harvey Elliott to be making a good 20 clear of that is very impressive. He's a young guy that has a desire to get onto the ball, a young guy who wants to see things happen. And again, high 80s for pass completion is very good against the European champions, especially considering he's trying to make things happen going forward. Long term, I imagine Thiago will take his place when Thiago is fully fit and ready to go. But for now, Harvey Elliott's doing a pretty good job, and against another team that wasn't Chelsea, this Liverpool side probably could have scored a few more with the 11 that they picked.
Yep, 100%. And we go to Chelsea's team. Mendy and Nets, Aspilicueta, Christensen, Rudiger back 3, Marcus Alonso, Reece James 2 wing backs, Kante and Jorginho in centre midfield, Havertz and Mason Mount pushing further up, and then Lukaku's a lone striker up front. So yet again, a change for Thomas Tuchel, who I don't think he's named an unchanged side yet in the Premier League. You shook your head there again at Marcus Alonso. I'm a big Ben Chilwell advocate.
Yeah,
it is disappointing for me that he's not playing. I'm not gonna lie. I think he's almost been overlooked in a way.
Yeah, well, Tuchel must know something that we don't, because Ben Chilwell has never played a bad game for Chelsea, I don't think, really, since he's been included by Tuchel. I think he was really solid towards the end of last season, put in good performances, and ultimately was in a side that won the Champions League, so you can't really complain. Marcus Alonso has his moments, and in this sort of formation, in this sort of system, he does flourish. We saw it under Conte with Chelsea, and he favoured Marcus Alonso, and we seem to be seeing it now at the start of this season. For some reason, Marcus Alonso was brought back into the side, scored a goal on week 1, played quite well last week, and again, I thought this week put in a shift, did what he needed to do. I want to see Ben Chilwell come back, but I can't really argue why at the same time, because Marcus Alonso is playing well. So why would you change it if it's working?
Yeah, 100%. Chelsea's team are so, whenever they get the ball and they on the counter, they can be so dangerous. And we saw from time to time, we saw Kante kind of take the ball and really push up in a stride and really take that ball forward. But I think the game ultimately didn't play out the way that we expected because of the red card, because of that incident at the end of the first half.
Yeah. Yeah, the way they're set up is a classic Tuchel system, and they would have played in a classic Tuchel way. They had far less possession than you maybe would have expected, which probably was due to the fact that Harvey Elliott wanted to get a lot of the ball. Henderson's got good retention, and Firmino was playing. So those sorts of players, lend into that. And Chelsea didn't get going in the second half at all. But in terms of setup, as a Chelsea fan, you can't really argue with that 11. It's a great 11 that could win on their day against anyone. And it's exciting, as you say, when they press. Havertz, I think, is great. Mount can run for days, and his work rate is unbelievable. And to have Lukaku, a striker who's just powerful and pressing up at the top, is something that Chelsea fans will absolutely love to see. So yeah, it's a frightening attack, and you can only imagine when Pulisic comes back what it might look like. And just that drive that Pulisic brings, and him, I would almost love to see a team of Werner and Pulisic either side of Lukaku, because I think that could be absolutely chaotic against certain teams, against teams that like to sit high up. Maybe a Man City, I would quite like to see him go for it with that sort of front three and just see what they can do.
Yeah, it is scary when you think of the names that are on the bench for Chelsea. We did mention that kind of last week, but the whole game, we'll get to the goals, but the whole game totally changed with this incident here. The Reece James handball. Now, I think we both agree that the absolute, definite, deliberate handball. And what we're actually looking at right now is the freeze frame that Anthony Taylor looked at for the VAR. So there's a lot of criticism about how this VAR was dealt with, in terms of he didn't watch the full clip. He didn't look at the whole situation, but this is what he saw. Now, the arm was quite clearly out and away from his body in this shot.
Yeah.
And the ball hits his knee first, but he actually made like this kind of motion with his arm kind of towards the ball to stop it from going in. So the rules are, and this is something I didn't 100% understand really, but the rules are, for a handball preventing a goal scoring opportunity, that the double jeopardy rule doesn't come into effect. That only comes into effect for tackles.
Yeah.
And so in this situation, it is a penalty and a red card.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have no objections to the whole freeze frame thing. I think if it's clear, that's a handball. And showing him a wee clip of that compared to the freeze frame doesn't do anything apart from waste time. Like, the VAR team have checked it, basically told him it's a penalty. Go have a wee look at the screen to make sure you're okay with it. It is a clear and obvious mistake, which I quite like that VAR has changed slightly in the Premier League this season. It's a clear and obvious things that they're overturning, more like the Euros, which went quite smoothly in terms of VAR. And so this was clear and obvious. And so all he needs to see is the clear and obvious mistake he's made, which was that freeze frame. That's clearly a handball. You thought it hit off his knee or his chest, but it actually hit off his hand. Here you go. Here's that evidence. And Anthony Taylor looks at it and says, yeah, absolutely, you're right. It's a penalty. I have no objections at all.
No, and he made the right decision. It was the right call. The one thing I would like to see implemented in the VAR, and maybe this is just coming from knowing rugby, is, as a viewer of the sport, even if you're at the ground, I think if you can hear the dialogue between VAR and the referee, at least fans know what the thought process is. So in rugby now, what happens is, if the TMO, so that's like essentially the VAR, spots something that the referee should have a look at, first off, the screen that it plays on is the big screen, so everybody in the stadium can see what's going on. But also, the referee has to make a decision, but he speaks to the team what his thought process is behind his decision. so that it's obvious why the decision's being made. And I think VAR could really benefit from that system of here's why this decision is being made. In terms of penalties, offsides doesn't work because the offside thing is a difficult one and it's tricky, and I think again it's still far too rigid. Like there should be an element of benefit of the doubt. If it's really, really close, it shouldn't be like flipping tiny lines. But
are you trying to tell me, Joe, that the thicker lines this season doesn't solve all of the problems?
Doesn't solve all the problems.
What?
I mean,
no way.
They tried to make it out like these thicker lines are going to give the benefit of the doubt to the attacker, but it's still no different. It's literally just the same. But with penalties and things like these decisions, I really do feel like, or red cards, I feel like an open dialogue between VAR and the refs would actually be really, really beneficial for the game because everybody would know what the thought process is.
Yeah, and we see that actually in the Australian League. They do that, which is great. And I remember seeing clips of that Australian ref who then came to ref in England and just him talking through what he had seen and why he's doing everything. And you love to see it. It helps. It's slightly longer, obviously, chatting through the process, but probably helpful.
But that ultimately did change the game. Now, before that, Chelsea had gone 1-0 up. Thanks to a lovely header from Kai Havertz. Unsure about its intentions and whether when he put his head on it, he was directing it into that corner, but it was like Josh McGuinness. It was the way it kind of looked over the keeper, and the keeper's he's fallen backwards and it's scored over his hand. Chelsea go 1-0 up.
Put some respect on Kai Havertz's name, please, and don't ever mention him in a sentence with Josh McGuinness ever again.
He's one of the best players in the world.
Josh McGuinness is a player I have no time for, no harm to him. But Kai Havertz, superb. And yeah, I think absolutely he meant it. I think he's going into that thinking, I'm going to head this across goal and hopefully it's going to go into the goal. You can't fault him for that. He's a player who comes up with big goals, apparently. Big game player, you could argue. Big match Kai. And he does like to just get on the end of things. He likes to work hard. He's 22. He's young. He's athletic. He's a great player. I think technically he's got so much ability. And I'm really excited to kind of see him come into his own this season. The way he runs the ball and then the header is very difficult. That header back. Like flicking it backwards is really not an easy thing to do, and so fair play to him. It's a super header and like a semi against the run of play, but also fully deserved goal at the same time. It's a weird one when you watch Chelsea sometimes, and in this game you didn't necessarily think that they deserved to score, but they did at the same time because of their pressing, because of their counter-attacking. Their tactical system was set up perfectly, I would say. And whenever that goal went in, I kind of turned around to my housemate when we were watching it and said, I reckon Chelsea will probably win 2-0 now, because Chelsea could just quite easily sit back, hold on, and potentially get another on the counter in the second half. Obviously, that didn't happen. But at this moment, it looked like Thomas Tuchel had another absolute masterstroke against a superb manager in Jurgen Klopp.
Yeah, I mean, as in terms of the first half and going against run of play, Liverpool only managed one shot on target, which was their penalty in that first half. So this is something that we talked about towards the end of last season, was that front three, and they're not clinical enough in terms of they don't get enough of their shots on target. And it's still something they need to work on. But we can't fault Chelsea's defensive performance. Then we had the penalty, and then we had a bit of a scrap after the penalty, which we all love a scrap.
We do.
I thought we could have seen in the second half even more kind of feistiness. The Chelsea players were absolutely livid with the decision because obviously they didn't see it in real time. But my biggest pet peeve in football is players at half-time complaining to the ref about the decision he made even 5 minutes before. It's not going to change. It's been 5 minutes since the game that decision's been made, and there's been play in between that and half-time. He can't change the decision. He can't go, actually, sorry lads, rewind. No penalty. Reece James back on you come, and we're going to replay these last 5 minutes. It's never going to happen. So I think that's like one of my biggest pet peeves is when they surround the ref to be like, that was a terrible decision, as if it's going to make a difference. In fact, what you're doing is you're making a more negative perception of the referee on you as a player, and he's going to be more likely to look at your behaviour in the second half rather than, do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah, it is counterintuitive. It's a waste of time ultimately. It shouldn't change too much from a ref's perspective, hopefully, in a very professional setting. But yeah, I don't get why they do it. You'd be better just going into the dressing room, finding out what you're going to do in the second half tactically, and get your mindset, ready for that, and just prepare yourself for what will be a very intense 45 minutes, going down to 10 men and conceding a goal in the stroke of half time. So yeah, it was frustrating, but we love the scrap. We love to see people fighting for their cause. We love the Chelsea players' frustration. Rudiger and Mendy both getting yellow cards off the back of the aggression, which wasn't ideal for them, because it meant going into a second half with a man down, your centre back's got a yellow card. That's not great. But yeah, a right penalty and a well taken penalty by Salah. Comfortable, calm, in spite of Mendy and Jorginho trying to put him off as best as they could. It was, thoroughly well done, and kind of deserved. They had a lot of possession, Liverpool, in the first half. I think around 63% in the first half, which is pretty solid. But the one shot on target is a concern, and that kind of continued in the second half, in what we saw a very defensive Chelsea team against a Liverpool team that could not break it down.
Yeah, Chelsea played a lot of the game with 10 men behind the ball.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, there was instances where Lukaku was the one clearing the ball from his own box, and actually that's something that Lukaku brings. He's so big and he's so solid that he's almost like an extra defender for crosses. Like, he's almost that. He gives that extra kind of strength, something that maybe something like a Werner maybe doesn't give, and that Chelsea were always going to try and hold out for a draw. That they were never going to try and take the win because it's so early on the season. What will be the point? But also with Liverpool at Anfield, and the atmosphere was incredible, and they had those fans behind them. Chelsea really, it was backs to the wall for a lot of it for them.
It was, and Tuchel has a system that works for that. Tuchel has a tactical mind that knows how to play that game. And if you look back at the end of the season and you ask yourself, what games are we really glad that we got a point from? Away at Anfield with 10 men would be one of them. It's the type of game, like, you're happy to take a draw in a 38-game season. Losing 2 points here against one of your fellow title contenders after going down to 10 men is not the end of the world. And so going for a draw, fair play. If you can pull it off, it's very impressive. If you can't pull it off, you look like an idiot and you look like you've made such a bad decision. But if there's one manager and one squad of players that are back to be able to hold out against anyone, it's Chelsea.
I do think one of the biggest compliments to give this Chelsea defence was Liverpool had 14 shots in the second half, but 6 of them were from outside the box. So in that first half, Liverpool had 10 shots and only 1 was from outside the box. So actually, in that first half, they were able to do more inside the box than they were in the second half relative to the number of the shots that they had. So really solid from Chelsea. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I might be remembering this incorrectly, but there never really felt like an opportunity where Liverpool were going to score in that second half.
No, they didn't make any big chances. They made chances, semi-chances, but not anything that you thought, oh, flip, they probably should have scored that. There was one chance, to be fair, you could argue, where Salah was in the box and he hit the worst shot with his right foot ever. That was a good position. That was a good counter from Liverpool. And if they were going to score, it probably would have been then. But Salah takes it onto his weak foot and hits what is an awful daisy cutter shot, which goes about 2 miles an hour. Like, it was so slow, and you could just see he was so annoyed at himself.
Yeah, so realistically, at the end of the day, I think a 1-1 result was actually fair. based on the balance of play, how things played out, I think Chelsea get rewarded for their excellent defensive display. The only thing that I question is obviously Liverpool's goal was from a penalty.
Yeah.
Apart from that penalty, they didn't really look like scoring.
No, they didn't.
Is that because of how good Chelsea are defensively? Or is it a mixture of Chelsea good defensively, Liverpool still not firing on all cylinders up front?
I think it's a bit of both because Chelsea are so great. But Liverpool, we saw last season, teams kind of started to suss them out a little bit at the start of the year because they play the same way as they did when they won the league and when they won the Champions League. They play that sort of system, and if you know how to counteract that, then Liverpool aren't amazing. But Liverpool, they look good against Norwich. They look good in their first couple of games, and even against Burnley they look better. But against Chelsea here, they kind of look like that sort of team who's just not quite sure how to get it done, not quite sure how to get the ball through to their attacking players, not quite sure what to do whenever there's 10 men sitting back against you. And in this team, you don't really back any of them to hit one from 40 yards either. Not that anyone should ever really be expected to hit one from 40 yards. But if you're going to, Thiago's probably the closest that you've got, or maybe a Trent to try and curl it or something in. But you don't look, Salah, Mane and Jota, you don't look at them and think, any of them could just score in a moment of magic. Well, maybe they shouldn't have sold Shaqiri. Who knows? Maybe he's the answer to all their problems.
Is it worrying? Or certainly, I think it's not worrying, but I think the most difficult thing for me to understand at the moment is you look at what the other title contenders are doing this summer in the transfer window. Chelsea have added one of the best strikers in the world to their already unbelievable squad. City have added Grealish to their already unbelievable squad, who set up one of the goals against Arsenal and looked good. United have added a couple of players into their squad. Liverpool's squad essentially hasn't really changed since they won the league, whereas Chelsea's squad has changed drastically. If we even take 2 years, Chelsea's squad has changed massively. United's team has changed and evolved a wee bit. City, maybe not so much, but City have one of the best. But again, they did add Ruben Diaz, I suppose. I forgot about that signing that really bolstered their defence. Is it worrying from a Liverpool perspective that they aren't going out into the market and looking at new players, maybe bringing some excitement into the squad?
I think it is worrying to an extent that they want new players, but you look at this team and to bring in a player who's going to come into the starting 11 and actually be better than what they've already got is very difficult. They have the best wing backs in world football. They have one of the best centre backs in world football, one of the best goalkeepers in world football. Fabinho, you could argue 100%, he's one of the best defensive midfielders in world football. Jordan Henderson is their captain, their leader. They need him in the team. And Salah and Mane are also some of the best players in world football. And so you look and you think, maybe a striker, but they're going to have to spend big bucks to get him, and they just aren't willing to do that. It would have to be a Haaland, it would have to be an Mbappe, it would have to be somebody ridiculously expensive, which they're just not quite willing to do. And so it's twofold in that, yes, they could easily go out and splash money for the sake of it, but are they going to get what they need? No, probably not. And so I see why they're not spending money, although squad depth is an important thing. The AFCON happens in January, and for 2 games in the Premier League, at least it's only 2 games, but Salah, Mane, Keita leave, Matip, they're leaving, and what do you do then? What does the attack look like? Are you going to play Minamino, Origi, and Jota, or that's just not a great attack, and I worry about them in that case. But thankfully, it is only 2 games. But if it works out and Liverpool do well, then they get a lot of credit for running a football club well, for building a squad and trusting the process over the course of years. It's what Klopp's been working on now for many years, is getting this group of players ready for this stage of their footballing careers. They're all kind of hitting their prime. They should be grand. I think Klopp's doing great things and not spending a ridiculous amount of money. which we surely have to admire more than
Yeah,
slate,
yeah, yeah,
because it's very easy to go out and spend all the money in the world.
yeah. Yeah, but I get that 100%. Speaking of trusting the process, the main topic discussion last week was all about Arsenal. I don't want to laugh, but I did
Joe,
not. I did not
uh,
think it was going to be as bad as it was on
I
Saturday, and
did.
here
I
we
did.
are.
I said, my brother's an Arsenal fan. I said to him beforehand, I was like, mate, this could be 4 or 5 easily. And I said to my mum was there. She was like, so we're gonna watch Arsenal lose against Man City this week, and I was like, yeah, of course we
Yep.
are. It's gonna be like 5 or 6, mum. It's gonna be ridiculous. And I flipping, I want to love Arsenal. I don't know. I don't know why. I just always have liked Arsenal, and I think that they're a fun club when it's run well.
Hmm.
But I can't at the moment because they are idiots, just a whole bunch of them. Like, oh my word! Do you know what? Give Arsenal some credit. They started the game well. For the first 6 minutes, Arsenal were good. Arsenal went
Hmm.
forward well, were attacking well. They looked like they knew what they were doing going forward. And then Man City had their first attack of the game, and Callum Chambers showed us why he's not a Premier League centre back and shouldn't be anywhere near the starting 11 of an Arsenal team in 2021.
Yeah, honestly, shocking in so many ways. I just want to add something in here for you to have a look at because I think this is quite funny. So
You have
obviously we
three
had like
centre backs. You have three centre backs: Chambers, Kolasinac, and Holding. Two of which aren't centre backs and should never be playing centre back. One of which is an average centre back at best. And you've got those three big men in the box. None of them are doing anything. And Gundogan's able to get in. Gundogan's he's not notorious, goal scorer in terms of heading ability. He's not a man who's well known for rising above and scoring. He's a wee man in midfield who went on a terrific scoring run last season, but all with his feet. And Arsenal just showed that defensively, Mikel Arteta has not a clue.
well, so the attack momentum meter that Sofa scored to paint a really fantastic picture. Wait till you see this. So Arsenal are in blue and Man City are in green. So as you were saying, the first 6 minutes, Arsenal played very well. But then for the other 84 minutes, and for audio listeners, I'll just describe what we see. Um, for the first 6 minutes, you see a small amount of attack coming from Arsenal, kind of a bit of momentum there. For the rest of the game, literally every single minute for the rest of the game, the bar is green for Man City, and the bars are significantly high. Like we're talking like high levels of momentum. Um, just crazy stuff. And even statistically, like, oh my days, I don't think I've ever seen anything like this in a game where historically Man City Arsenal, maybe a couple of seasons ago, might have been a big game, right? I think we need to get rid of this Arsenal being one of the big contender ideas and that they are a mid-table club now. It's like no different to Man City playing Leeds.
No, I disagree. I completely disagree. I think
What they don't produce anything. They don't produce. That they're a mid-table club.
but this is what happens. Like United did this a few years ago. Like United finished, 8th in the Premier League, and under whoever it was, I can't even remember, Moyes probably. Like when Sir Alex left, like this is what United did. But you can't just then shift that mindset of them being a small club, mid-table club, because they will bounce back. Like Arsenal have enough money, they have enough worldwide, sponsorship and support that they are going to be a big club, and if they get the right manager in, they still have that appeal, they still have that draw. You see that there's a reason Ben White signed for them and not staying at Brighton. There's a reason why Aubameyang's at the club. There's a reason why they're able to bring in players like Martin Odegaard. They are still a big club and they do have aspirations long term, but at the moment Mikel Arteta is not going to get them there. Arguably, the Cronkies aren't going to get them there either. And if I was an Arsenal fan, I'm going to be sitting praying all night, every night, that Daniel Ek buys the club, it gets accepted, and he comes in and appoints a manager who knows he knows how to play football and knows tactically what he's doing. And that's what Arsenal fans need. Their squad is good enough to finish in the Europa League places. It's good enough to finish around there. It's good enough to get them some sort of performance, but they just need somebody to do it, and Arteta is never going to get them there.
But I just want to counter what you're saying because I understand where you're coming from. But late 90s, Newcastle were effectively challenging for the league. We're one of the biggest clubs in England, and were second twice in a row. Bottled the league in '98, I think it was, or '99, one of those two. Bottled it in the final day. They were top of the league pretty much all season, then lost it in the last day of the season. And they had their decline. And look at where Newcastle are now as a relegation struggling club. And my point is that expectations this season for Arsenal have to be different from, in terms of, you look at an Arsenal Man City, it doesn't have the same weight to it anymore, was more my point, in that it's not going to affect the title race because Arsenal aren't in it. And Arsenal are, at best, going to be hoping for a Europa Conference League this season, because I think there are easily 6 teams that are better than them this season. The point is, if they don't get Europe again, they're going to lose players, because players don't want to play for clubs. The top players aren't going to go to a club that aren't challenging for European places. And if Arsenal fail again this season, you could have a knock-on effect where next season they struggle again because they don't have the players that they want to bring in. I just think, watch this space for Arsenal.
No, I don't. I think even this season they have no European football. Martin Odegaard signed for them, who was touted as one of the next biggest things, and is a quality player on his day. You know, Arsenal still have that appeal, and the sooner Arteta's gone, and the sooner, you know, the likes of a Conte or whoever wants to comes in, then the better. And they will be back challenging for European football year after year. They just need to get rid of Arteta.
That requires them to get rid of Arteta, and that doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon. You know,
well, the reports have changed a lot over the last couple of weeks. Like last week, the reports very much became Arteta has a few games to save his management, which had never been even seen before. It was always trust the process. Whereas last week it was he's got 5 games now to see how it goes, and I don't see it getting better. So I reckon Arteta could be gone by November.
Let's look at player ratings just quickly, because I think this reads interesting reading as well. Let's go to the back 5, right? Cedric Suarez, 4.9. Callum Chambers, 6.6. Rob Holding, 6.7. Kolasinac, 5.8. And Tierney, 6.1. Absolutely horrific scores across the board. And obviously they had the Granit Xhaka red card, and that affected things too. But statistically, there were 26 shots in the game, and 25 of them were for Man City. Just a bizarre set of stats to read, to be honest.
I cannot accept for a moment that Callum Chambers deserves a 6.6. Callum Chambers was fully at fault for both of the first 2 goals, in my opinion, because number 1, misses the header, and number 2, he's too busy rolling around the ground to defend. If he was on his feet, he would have defended it. He would have kept the ball out. But he wasn't, because he was trying to do something in a game of football that's changing with VAR. He's trying to win something that you would never have attempted 5 years ago, because he's an idiot who hasn't played enough football in the last 5 years. He doesn't play football regularly. He was on loan at Fulham, who got relegated. Like that's not a good player to have around your club, full stop. Callum Chambers should be gone from Arsenal Football Club. So should Kolasinac. Neither of them should have been at the club. Neither of them should have been playing.
No.
Holding is mediocre at best. Holding deserves to be at a team like Newcastle, not a team like Arsenal. No harm to Newcastle, but he's just not there. The likes, if you play Ben White, Gabriel, and William Saliba, you've got much better chances of doing well and defending well, because those 3 defenders can defend. Rob Holding's just a bald man who can stick his head on something. Like, he's not good. Tierney's awful. On his day, he's unbelievable. He's awful on Saturday, but on his day, he's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And that's really sad. But also, I think he's made to look worse because all of the other players are so crap that he has to play as a centre back and a wing back effectively. Because Kolasinac is just a liability through and through, and I feel for him. And just the way they set up, why on earth has Arteta decided this is the week he's going to drop the second holding midfielder and just play Xhaka on his own? Like against Man City, who have a lot of the ball, Lukonga would have been perfect for this game. Arteta doesn't have a clue half the Arsenal team doesn't deserve to be playing Premier League football, while Arsenal shambolic.
Only 2 teams now haven't scored yet in the Premier League.
No, only Arsenal, is it not? Or Wolves haven't
Wolves
scored?
as well. Yeah, Wolves and Arsenal. Two of the current bottom 3. Of course, only 3 teams with 0 points as well, and that's Wolves, Norwich, and Arsenal. And Arsenal have conceded the second most goals, I think, behind Norwich. So really not pretty reading whatsoever. And on the other end, for the first time ever in history, Spurs are top of the league and Arsenal bottom of the league. Spurs grinding out another 1-0 result. Nuno's doing a decent enough job. Start off with first 3 games, 3 wins. Not bad going.
I knew you would, though. Nuno showed at Wolves that he is a superb manager. Like, he's really good, and he's showing now that he can do it without all of the Portuguese players. It's quite nice to see, but he's got a brilliant squad at times at his disposal at Tottenham. Like, going forward, they're super. Dele Alli looks a new man, and Højbjerg is playing absolutely beautifully. Skip is an interesting choice, but I kind of like that he's trusting Skip and not letting the likes of Ndombele, who doesn't want to be there, play. Getting rid of Sissoko because he knows he's never going to use him and things like that. I like that from him. And defensively, they look much more solid. Yeah, fair play. You're doing well. 1-0 wins. They're not pretty all the time, but if you win 1-0 38 times, you'll win the league comfortably.
True.
He's done it 3 times so far, 35 more, and he'll be laughing the whole way
Easy.
to lifting the Premier League title with Harry Kane, loving life.
Easy peasy. I think we'll do it. I think now you've said that'll come to pass.
Yeah, I think so.
So that was kind of, just wanted to briefly mention that because Spurs are North London is white at the minute.
Well,
but also I want to talk about Newcastle because boy oh boy am I sad about what's going on at Newcastle. It's so difficult for me because I know we're crap. Like, I know we're rubbish. And we're not going anywhere with Steve Bruce or Mike Ashley. And I think the problem that we have is that we can't get rid of either.
Yeah. Although I think Newcastle played well on Saturday to an extent.
To an extent we did, but it's not good enough in that you go 2-1 up, you score in the 91st minute. You can't be going conceding penalties at the end of the game.
Well, that's an individual mistake more than anything, though. Like, Steve Bruce clearly had his arms out like this, saying, "Boys, calm, nice and calm. Don't do anything stupid." And Lascelles did something stupid. So clearly they just don't listen to their manager. One thing I was inspired by Newcastle, I ranted a few weeks ago about the terrible midfield situation of John Joe Shelby, Isaac Hayden and Almiron, and I was delighted to see today, or not today, on Saturday, that it was Almiron, Longstaff and Willock. That fills me with so much more confidence in Newcastle, and I think Willock played okay, but Longstaff had a great game and played very well. Probably deserves to stay in there instead of those other 2 headers. Like,
so Maximan is far too good for us. He embarrasses defenders on a regular basis.
He does.
And there's an element of it, Newcastle. Just get the ball to Allen. Just get the ball to him. See what happens. Maybe that's how we're going to score our goals. Callum Wilson will always poach.
Mate, it's worked for Barcelona over the last couple of years, so why not? Why not? Just give it to the one man.
Yeah. I just felt after Saturday and 1 point from our first 3 games, it's just not what it should be, and it's not enjoyable to watch. Apart from it's enjoyable to watch when St. Maximin gets the ball. Now, I think I would love to see Willock really come into his own. But that remains to be seen.
If that team plays, but with Jamal Lewis at left back instead of Matt Ritchie, I think you've got something that's actually quite decent in terms of an 11. Like, that's not a bad team to be starting those, but that back 3 is much better than the 3 they started with in the opening weekend. And it's not the end of the world.
But the last team I really want to talk about, who we didn't get a chance to talk about last week because they were playing when we were recording, was West Ham. a disappointing result for them on Saturday based on how they've done so far this season with a 2-2 draw against Crystal Palace. But Mikel Antonio is like top goal scorer so far,
Yeah,
I think.
4 goals, 3 assists.
Like 7 goal contributions in 3 games, is that?
Not bad.
That's ridiculous numbers. Um, what do we think about West Ham? Where do we think they are as a team, as a unit?
I think they've been helped by who they've played so far. I think they're good. They're good, and they will get better. And signing Kurt Zuma is superb for them. Potentially signing an attacking midfielder in Vlasic could be good if he's good, but he could be a waste of 30 million at the same time. I'd rather spend 30 million on Jesse Lingard, who's proven last season. But I think, I want to see them play some good teams. I want to see them they're good, and if these are the games that, as a West Ham fan, these are the games you're sitting thinking we need to keep picking up points in these games, and getting 7 points so far has been good for them. But a draw against Crystal Palace, who hadn't scored before this weekend, is a sign that maybe West Ham aren't ridiculously unbelievable. They're scoring a lot of goals, yes, but they've also conceded 5. Do you know they've scored 10, but they've conceded 5. That's more concerning against the big teams. Ride the wave, absolutely. They're doing a great job so far. But when they play a City, when they play a Chelsea, when they play a Liverpool, we'll see what happens, because I don't back their defence to keep out the big teams as much as Mikel Antonio will try. And he will score goals, and they will do well going forward. Ben Rama looks great. Fornals is playing well. We love Declan Rice in the middle. But I would be more concerned against the bigger teams. I think they'll finish 8th.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to them, I think their performance against Leicester was super. I don't think they ever allowed Leicester to get into the game. Obviously aided by a red card for Perez, but I honestly feel like Leicester are still, in my head, one of the top 6 clubs in the league who are challenging for Europe every season. But they are.
I wouldn't say
so.
I think they have done the last couple of seasons, but this season will be like, you notice how crap they are without Johnny Evans at the back. Like, it's ridiculous how much one player can make a difference to the Leicester team. And Leicester at times last season looked like a really mediocre team. They bottled finishing in the top 4. Like, there's a thing with Leicester that is really frustrating, I can imagine, as a Leicester fan, because at times they look unbelievable, but then at times they look like they could easily get relegated if they played like that every week. And missing Johnny Evans here is such a big thing for them. Soyuncu doesn't look the same player he did a few seasons ago. They've made some good signings, yes, but Leicester, like that Leicester win, or the West Ham win against Leicester, I think highlighted Leicester's crappy defence more than highlighted anything else.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's an interesting one. I do see Leicester as one of the top 6 teams in the league. I think it's Liverpool, Chelsea, United, City, Spurs, and Leicester are your best 6 teams.
Well, yeah, that's fair enough. Like, based on the last few seasons, Leicester have finished around those places. But again, there's times when they just don't look the whole thing. And I think this season as well with Europa League isn't going to help that. Like, already they looked rubbish against West Ham. I can only imagine what they're going to look like having to travel somewhere on a Thursday and then play on a Sunday. It's not gonna be great for them.
But it's been an interesting start. We obviously have a week's break, and we're probably not going to record next week because you're super busy and you're away and you're doing stuff, and also it's internationals, and it's difficult to record at a time whenever like the internationals go over like 8 days or something. So I think we'll take a break probably, I would say, and we'll be back in 2 weeks' time when the Premier League returns. Interesting start to the league. Obviously, we need 3 games, so we don't really know much. I think that's always the downside, the way that the fixture goes. You only really get 3 games, then they're away again. You know, it's like a microclimate. It's just not enough. But I think we'll really know kind of between September and October where things are going when the transfer window's done. Whenever teams have got what their squads are going to be for at least the next 4 months, I think we'll see them. But yeah, it's been an interesting start overall.
It has indeed. It's been good though. It's been good to have the football back. We love to see it. But yeah.
So we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. Thank you all so much for your support of the new format. We're really glad to hear some of the positive feedback we've been getting, so we really do appreciate it. And look after yourselves, stay safe, and enjoy the international break. Goodbye.